Right. Working. Not sure everyone can hear me. Anyone hear me? So let me know. Hi, Kumei. Awesome.
Hi, Poyi.
Hello. Hey, Liz. Sorry, I'm just setting it up.
Yeah, no, take your time. Couple minutes. Everyone's kind of wrapping up with their networking, so they'll come in here in just a second. Well, welcome. Come on in. And I'm going to just put a little message here that if people are, you're going to share your screen. So if people want to make it bigger, they just have to double click the screen. So.
Okay. Sounds good to me.
Just that here.
How's your day so far?
Really good. It's been long. Still have a lot going on tonight. Yeah. Now, how was your day?
Not too bad. I just hop off a meeting, so I'm right directly into this session. So just trying to get ready.
Your event and meeting after meeting. There you go. Share screen. You can double click.
I'm gonna jump the share screen while just making sure it's working, and then I'm gonna do that.
That's good. I am gonna let you take it from here, and then when you're done, you can totally add people to come into your room at the moderation panel. There, you just hover and add everyone. But that's when you're done, and then you can have a chat, and you can see all the questions coming in on that right side.
Got it. Quick question. What do you mean by, I guess I forgot, how do you add people on the moderation panel?
Yeah, so you just hover over them and you'll see like a little plus sign. Yeah, there you go.
Awesome. I'll do that afterwards.
All right, cool. I'll come and check on you later.
Yeah. I think we'll probably begin in about a minute. So let me just jump to the presentation and make sure that's ready to go.
Yeah, so we've got about 32 holding steady in here. So
cool.
Whenever you're.
Yeah. Just make sure it's all good. Okay. All right, I think we're ready to go. Why don't we get started? So hi, everyone, in case you're just tuning in. Before we jump into today's topic, I just want to maybe take a few seconds to quickly introduce myself. So my name is Poyi, and I've been designing for just about 10 years, working with different types of companies throughout my design career, from agencies to startups to larger companies. I'm currently working at a company called Chegg, which is an online education company that offers services like textbook rental, study help, online tutoring, as well as other services that help students succeed in their academic journey. On my spare time, I do other things like side projects, do design consulting work, as well as mentoring designers to help them navigate their design career. I've been a Designlab mentor for quite a few years now, so I really enjoy working with designers to share my knowledge. So I'm very excited to be here today to participate in this conference with you and meeting all of you. And if you're curious about my background, my work, I'm happy to chat more about it towards the end of the Q&A session, where I plan to have about maybe 10 minutes at the end just for Q&A. But for now, let's jump into today's topic. All right, so just a little bit of a backstory. When I was thinking about today's topic, I was reflecting back on my own design career as a designer working in the industry for about 10 years, as well as looking at what the design job market is like today, in order to try to identify what are some of the biggest challenges we face as designers. And one of the things that really stood out to me was that designers are expected to possess quite a bit of skills, even at the entry level. For example, just grabbing a random job description from the internet for entry-level design position, it shows that there are maybe a dozen things that the designer is expected to do, from things like solving problems, creating design concept wireframes, advocating for the user, to collaborating with the team. So as I dug deeper into these requirements, there was one topic that stood out to me as something that's not often talked about or discussed, especially when you're just starting out to learn about UX. And the topic is collaborating with the cross-functional team throughout a project cycle. So that's what I'll be talking about today. This topic is targeted more towards aspiring designers who haven't worked on a project with a team, or designers who may be working for smaller companies and haven't had a chance to collaborate with a larger cross-functional team just yet. By the end of this session, my goal is hopefully give you a high-level overview of the potential stakeholders you might be working with throughout the project cycle, and show you how, as designers, we'll be interacting with the team. And given that we only have about 20 minutes for this session, as a disclaimer, it's not really possible for me to walk through everything about stakeholders and the project cycle, but I thought it might be beneficial for me to focus on introducing you to just a few key members of the project team. I'll talk about who they are, what do they do, and walk you through an example project cycle to see how these team members collaborate with each other from a designer standpoint. Now, before I dive into I like to begin, or I like to emphasize that like a team composition could be very different depending on the company size, depending on the type of businesses. And for the sake of time, I won't be able to go through all the stakeholders' personas out there. So I pick out just a handful of them to talk about today. And these stakeholders are the product manager, the front engineer, the back engineer, the UX researcher, as well as the content writer. So first, let's talk about the product manager, also commonly known as the PM. A product manager is the owner of the entire product line, as well as the project related to this product. A product could be defined very differently from company to company. For example, bigger companies like Amazon probably has multiple product managers to manage their product verticals like Amazon Music, Amazon Prime, Amazon Fresh, these are all products. And other smaller companies might have product managers who manage just a smaller part of the experience, for example, like a sign-up process or a checkout process. Regardless how the product is defined, the product manager is responsible for the success of the product and need to report to the business, basically reporting the results of the business to the upper management team. Within the project cycle, product manager is often viewed as a project coordinator as well as a decision maker. Product manager cares a lot about helping the team prioritize the right thing to focus on and providing any information the team would need in order to move the project along. So to summarize, the product managers are the key driver for any project, and they're very goal and data oriented. Next, we have the front engineer, who's also known as UI engineer sometimes. So front engineers are one of the key builders of the product. Their main responsibility is to translate the designs created by designers into code. This means that they focus on creating all the aspects of the user-facing experience, including the user flows, the look and feel, as well as the interaction, like smaller animation and things. So when working with front engineers throughout the project cycle, they want to understand all the design details so that they can make sure all the potential use cases are covered. To really summarize what they do, front engineers help the team to build everything the users would see according to the design specs. Then we have the backend engineer, who works a little bit behind the scene. The job of a backend engineer is to build infrastructures or functionalities that support the UI feature. To give you a quick example, when you have a website that allows people to search for restaurants, when your users search for something using a search box, the website needs to be able to show a list of restaurants to them, right? So in this case, the previously mentioned front-end engineers will be the one that builds the look and feel of that search box and how the results will show up on the page, while the backend engineer will be responsible for maintaining the database that stores the restaurant data and enable the application to return the most relevant restaurant based on what the user was searching for. So throughout the project cycle, the back engineer worries about the feasibility of the feature and works really closely with frontend engineers to build the desired user experience. Next, we have the UX researcher, who is also the advocate for the user, kind of similar to what we do as designers. The researchers are often responsible for gathering insights about the target user and also share these insights with all the stakeholders to help the team make decisions. When working on a project, researchers help designers to identify usability problems and validate design concepts. So to summarize, the researchers speak up for the users and help the team stay grounded to the user needs. And then last but not least, we have the content writers, who are considered the brand voice experts. And their role is to help the team communicate efficiently to the user in a way that's very consistent with the brand. So throughout the project, the content writers help to come up with the content strategy. And content strategy is a big topic in itself, but for the purpose of today, just understanding that involves thinking about the type of content we use, how to phrase the messaging, and how to deliver those content. So when working with content writers on a day-to-day project, they tend to focus on the best way possible to deliver the core message and pay attention to the voices and tones of the content copy. So now that we have a quick understanding of the different stakeholders, let's walk through a sample project cycle to see how these team members interact with each other, as well as the designers throughout the process. So when talking about the project cycle, the first thing that you might ask is, where do projects come from? And the answer could be very different, again, depending on the company, but here are some possibilities. So one potential source is to get project ideas from customers directly. Maybe the company that you work for sends out a survey to collect regular user feedback, and many people who took the survey requested a particular feature. So that might be an idea that you want to build. Another potential source idea is to look at competitors and see what they're offering. It's very common for companies to want to release similar features as their competitors in order to stay competitive on the market. So someone on the team may be just keeping track of those features. One other possibility is to get project ideas from anyone within a company. Ideas can really come from different places like regular meetings, random coffee chat with a coworker, or maybe one day you just get a request from the CEO telling you that, hey, we should work on this idea. But regardless of where the ideas come from, it's important to call out that the product managers will be the person to collect these ideas, prioritize them, and decide what the team should be working on. So once the product managers figure out which project to work on with the team, at the very beginning of the project cycle, it usually starts off with a project kickoff meeting. And this is where the product managers will lay out the project goals, success metrics, milestones, deadlines, and other relevant information to align the team on what needs to be accomplished. This project kickoff meeting is also the time where the team members may raise questions or concerns about the project. It's important to set expectations and get all the alignments from the team before they go off to work on their parts. And for designers, this is where we should be clarifying the project goals and try to tease out any potential problems we need to focus on solving for the user. Once the team is aligned on the project brief, the next stage of the project is what I call the discovery phase. And sometimes it's also called the understanding or the research phase. So during this stage, the designers may be working with each stakeholders to get a better understanding of the project from multiple angles. And this is where designers may be doing things like, here's the evaluation, component analysis, journey mapping, stakeholder interviews, or even running design workshops. The product manager can also be very involved in this process to help the designer gather information. You may also see researchers stepping in to help support to gather those user feedback or stakeholder insights. And in addition, the content writers may be working along with designers to come up with a content outline so that they can generate some sample content for designers to work with in the future mockups. Then the engineers may also be able to talk to designers and walk them through details about what's really feasible from a technical standpoint so that the designers can understand all the technical constraints. And then once the team knows enough about the project, then the team may move into what I call the define phase. And this is where the team will try to hone in on key problems to solve and potential solution to explore. And for designers, we may be doing things like defining problem statement, how might we statements, creating personas, defining design principles for the project, and making user flows, etc. And this is also where the designers will be sharing information that we have about the project with the entire team to get their feedback and make sure if there's any revisions that needs to be made before moving on to the next phase. When there's enough alignment on the direction of the design, then the team may enter the next phase called ideation. And this is where the designers will be doing things like sketching, drawing wireframes, creating design mockups using tools like Adobe XD, which, by the way, you can also use to make awesome awesome prototypes with. And during this phase, the designers will be working really closely with content writers to create the actual design mockups with realistic content such as images and copies. And just continue with the ideation phase. When the design reaches a good state, it's common for designers to host design reviews with the team to serve as check-ins and to collect feedback to iterate more. There might be multiple rounds of review happening during this phase, and the same process can be repeated until the team is ready to move forward to the next stage. Then the next stage is all about validating the design solution created from the last round. During this phase, the designers will be working closely with researchers to work on a research plan, conducting maybe rounds of user testing to gather feedback from the target user. It's common for both designers and content writers to be iterating between rounds based on the feedback we got. And the goal of this phase really is to help the team decide whether the proposed solution is good enough to build and release. And assuming the user testing went really well and the team is convinced that the design is ready to go, the team usually moves into a handoff phase. And this is where designers will be preparing design documentations and work really closely with engineers to make sure that they understand what to build. Once engineers finish building the designs, there's usually a time for the entire team to play with the product before they launch it. And that's commonly known as the quality assurance phase. So, and then we finally get to the finish line. The team can now celebrate and hopefully the user will be happy with their feature. And sometime in the future, there will likely be like a follow-up for the team to review how the release feature performed from a business metric standpoint. And the team will find out whether the project was actually successful. And that basically completes the project cycle. So to wrap up, we review the key stakeholders of the project team. We talked about who they are and talked about what they do. We also went over some example design process and discussed how the designers may interact with each of the team members throughout this process. And once again, I just want to mention that there are probably a lot of other stakeholders you might encounter at the company. What I shared today really just like a small sample, but hopefully it gives you a good idea of what to expect when you eventually join the company as a designer working on a cross-functional team. And thank you. That's it for the presentation portion. I also want to just caveat that, or not caveat, to give credit to the illustration aspect. So I didn't actually create illustrations. I actually grabbed it from a site called Icon 8. So that's a good source to sort of look into if you're looking for illustration icon to grab for any of your designs. So with that, I will go into the Q&A portion of this. Let me exit this. And I will invite people to join. And if there's any question, feel free to post them in the chat. I believe that's the place to post them. Does that work? All right, getting some people in here.
Oh, hey. Hey.
Yes. Okay.
Hi, Poyi. Hi. Thank you for your presentation. Quick question for you. Being the lead designer at Chegg, and also your previous leadership experiences, because I'm about to sign on to a startup, and they're hiring me up as the lead designer. So, cool. But I haven't really had previous experience with working with a team and leading them. I've always kind of been doing it on my own as a freelance design consultant. So what would be your few tips and things that going in being the leader from the aspect of how would you assess or quickly assess your teammates and then place them into or put them into groups in a way that would best fit for kind of as a team, to run as a team.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, first of all, congrats on the new position. Quick question though, are you actually going to be like hiring and managing the team, or you're like the main designer on the company?
I would be directing so I would be working directly with the CTO and also the founder or the client, and then executing everything from then on. But assuming that I would basically have to delegate all the responsibilities, among teammates, being it's an iOS app. So.
Okay. Yeah. I think my thoughts around that is like, first of all, as a leader in a company, your responsibility, aside from just doing design work, it's really also about influencing other people about the decision-making process, right? You want to like, one, speak for the user, to come up with, the best possible solution that you think is the right approach to go for the business, as well as the balancing against the user needs that you have. In terms of managing your team or managing your other people that you work with, working towards that goal, I think it's really about identifying, one, like from the business side, what are some of the goals you need to meet as an employee of the company? And two, looking into the target users that you're serving and see what are their needs and try to align their needs with the business needs. So finding that common ground between them. And in terms of how to best allocate work, I think it's really just about balancing resources to make sure they're working on the right thing, right? So depends on the composition of your team, figure out what their strengths and weaknesses are. And then that's where you can figure out who should be focused on driving what. Like maybe as a designer, you're also a great communicator. You're good at basically bringing people together and brainstorming ideas. So you might want to do a little bit more to that because that's part of your strength to help drive a conversation within the company. So again, it's about working on aligning the goals between the business and the user, and then figure out how your team can support that process. Hopefully that answers your question. Maybe there's more we can talk about. Feel free to follow up too. And Alan, do you have a question as well?
I do. Hey, Poyi, thanks for the presentation. That was helpful. And for me, it's just understanding the first step in the project cycle when you receive a brief as a designer. What type of role and influence can you play into the project brief? Is it a matter of just receiving the brief, or do you contribute to development of the brief?
Yeah. I mentioned in the presentation that like it depends on the company. Sometimes we have the ability as designers or anyone in the company to contribute to idea, which will make it into the project brief. So hopefully the company that you work for has a culture where you have the ability to contribute, which gives you a little bit more of a sort of say in what you're working on. But if it's not working like that, then you still have the ability to chime in on where you think is actually the right thing to focus on, at least within the project scope. So your role as a designer when looking at a project brief is to be that voice to say, hey, are we actually doing this for the right reason? If not, what else should we be focusing on? So that's the part that I think you should probably focus on a little bit more when you're talking to people about project briefs.
Okay, that makes sense. Thanks.
Okay. Why don't we move to some of the questions in the chat? So I think the question starts from Mari. So what is the role of a product designer? So the titles in the industry is a little bit of a mess, as everyone probably seen from job descriptions. A product designer can sometimes be seen as the equivalent of a UX designer. So if you look at it from that standpoint, then a product designer or a UX designer really is to help create designs, at least work within this design process to help create ideas and design that supports, again, the business goals and also the user needs. So I'm going back to that point of balancing of those two. But we do things like, the stuff that I talked about in the process, creating design concepts, driving discussions, creating collaterals to help the team review what we're trying to do, and then actually creating the end solution that the user will see. So everything from that point on, from the beginning, like the idea or the problem, to the end results that we deliver. We got 6 minutes left, so hopefully that answers your question. Let me move on to Joyce's question. So do you think being able to code is a common expectation for UI designers? I don't think it's a common expectation for a UI designer, I guess you say UI designer, so which sometimes as companies, they expect UI designers to also be able to do engineering work, like UI engineering. So if that's the case, you really have to look into the description to see, do they want you to actually be able to code as part of the job? But as a UX designer or product designer, that's not a common expectation. You are at least like expected to know a little bit about coding so that you can understand how the website is made even, right? And then if you do know a lot more, that gives you a little bit of advantage of being able to work with engineers a little bit more smoothly. Like you speak in the same language, you understand some of the constraints that you guys might have from a technology standpoint. So I wouldn't say you need to learn how to code, but I think it's good to just learn a little bit about what coding process is like, especially doing HTML, CSS. Okay, let me move on to next question. So what's your favorite research methodology? I'm not exactly a researcher, but I've done research before. At least I work with research really closely. So I always enjoy doing the one-on-one interviews with the user, especially when you bring them to your lab and then you show them the stuff that you're working on, and then you get the feedback directly and you're able to follow up. So I feel like that's sort of the most efficient way to, not efficient from a cost standpoint, but it's a good way to really dig into what the user is thinking about when they're looking at something that you worked on. It's also very rewarding and satisfying when things just clicked. Like you show them something you were working on for like 5 months and it actually just worked exactly where you wanted. So that's sort of my favorite methodology. We have about 5 minutes left, so I think I can get through all the questions. So next question is, what do you think is the best way to present your UX design project in the form in front of stakeholders? I'm trying to decipher the question format. So I think the question is asking about what's the best way to present project in front of stakeholders. Typically, I guess maybe the answer depends on what kind of stakeholders are you speaking with. But in general, there are times where I can just show them the actual sketch file or Figma file or Adobe XD file that I'm working on and just show them the artboards. And sometimes that works depending on the person. For people who might be not as much in the loop of like the day-to-day design decisions, you probably want to consider a different format like a presentation deck to sort of show them, hey, here's the entire process that we took to go from the initial project brief to the solution that we have now. And then show them all the deliverables you have, kind of like what you would do on your design portfolio, sort of present your case study. So depending on the stakeholders, you might want to choose a different format, but the most common way for us to present work in at least day-to-day work is via presentation or just directly go into the design file. And then maybe the last question here is, what are some areas newbies overlook or miss when presenting design work? I think when I look at like a more junior designer, maybe presenting work in a design review, one area that could always be worked on is making sure that you're presenting the whole context of exactly what you're trying to solve. So again, what problem are you solving with this design? Or maybe what problems did you identify that you want to focus on with the design? What sort of options have you tried out that led you to this, this version that you're showing? Why is this version better than everything else that you've considered? So the initial part of the process of like setting that context, also showing that how you got from the beginning to where you are, that part is really important, and maybe not everyone is really like focusing a lot on that. People tend to just kind of jump directly into the design and say, hey, here's what I did. Here's to start describing the actual design itself, but not really giving enough context for people to understand how you got there. So hopefully that helps. And let me know if you have any other question. We have about 2 minutes left, so we can squeeze in one more question if there's any. No? Okay. Alan, do you have any questions? No? Okay. I think we're good then. So I believe the next one is the networking session, right? So I'll be joining that too. So hopefully I can meet some of you there. Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I guess.